Hi, everyone, and welcome back to AuDHD and Then Some. Today, I'm joined by Becca Gregory, a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist who specializes in rejection sensitivity, neurodivergence, and the emotional patterns that can leave us feeling stuck in anxiety, people pleasing, and shame. If you've ever replayed a conversation over and over again and assumed someone was angry with you because they replied differently, and struggled to cope with criticism or spent years feeling like you were way too much for people or not enough, like a lot of us neurodivergent people feel, then I think this episode is really going to resonate with you. Becca has dedicated her work to helping neurodivergent people understand what's happening inside their nervous system and, more importantly, how they begin to heal from those patterns rather than simply just managing them and coping with them like we have done our whole life. So, Becca, I really, really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ellie. I'm so happy to be here and I'm excited for our conversation today.
Thank you. How did you end up specializing in neurodivergence?
I think it's sort of a tale as old as time in some aspects for a late identified neurodivergent experience, in that sort of, interesting. Everyone around me is neurodivergent. All my clients are neurodivergent. My family members are neurodivergent. Come to find out, like the calls coming from inside the house, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But specifically, I started facilitating dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, skills groups for adults in 2021, I believe. And I was noticing as I was doing the screening for applicants for the group that people were listing their diagnoses, anxiety and ADHD, and depression and ADHD, and PTSD and ADHD. And I had come from learning DBT in sort of a community mental health setting where neurodivergence was not even a factor that we were considering when we were working with really complex and struggling clients. And so this was kind of my first foray into, oh, there's some connection here between ADHD and emotion regulation.
Mhm.
Because DBT skills are all about coping, like distress tolerance, emotion regulation tools, and communication and relationship skills, like interpersonal skills. And so my first thought was probably like a lot of people who aren't familiar with neurodivergence of, does everyone just have ADHD now? Like, what's going on? Why is
Yeah.
everyone having
It
ADHD
it feels
diagnosis?
it feels like that. Yeah,
Yeah. And so I didn't settle for that. And I got researchy. I did a deep dive
of course.
and come to find out
The neurodivergence was out that day.
100%, yes. Hyperfixation, special interest activated. And so I started to do some more research into ADHD, and shockingly, I was shocked in the moment because it wasn't common knowledge, like in my training, in my clinical training or my supervision or my practice prior, that emotion regulation is an executive function skill.
Yeah.
That being able to tolerate distressing emotions, behave in a way opposite of how that emotion wants you to act, right? And being able to ride that wave of intensity of emotion is an executive function. And
I
so,
didn't know that. That is something that I mean, the last 10 years I've been good. I'm 40 now, my children in their 20s, I'm grown up now. But
mm,
all the way even into my 30s, I've had a hard life because I can't deal with rejection, and I can't deal with my emotion. It'd be easy if I'm advising my sister, my friend, I'll be like, think about it logically and use the logic. But when it comes to me, when I'm in that moment, there's no logic. The logic's gone out the window. So it's
100%.
really interesting to know because a lot of people, is it in the DSM-5, the RSD? No.
Is not. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
considered a disorder or diagnosis. It'd be more of like sort of a syndrome, like a
Yeah.
group of experiences that a lot of people tend to have at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was even a little bit later into facilitating my DBT skills group that it happened upon rejection sensitive dysphoria. And because a lot of times, right, I mean, our emotions can be dysregulated for a lot of reasons and not just rejection, but
Yeah.
that emerged as like a very common experience, right?
Yeah.
That when people are really struggling to be able to regulate emotions, it's very often in interaction with other humans,
Yeah.
most of the time, right?
Yeah. It's true.
And so I then had to sort of learn enough from my group members, from other people's lived experience, from the research, to be able to sort of adapt the curriculum for the skills training group to neurodivergent brains, because it is not created with neurodivergent people in mind.
Is there
And
anything catered? So that's a completely different sector. We're completely not considered within that framework.
yeah. And,
Hmm.
and DBT is created, a long time ago, decades ago, in by Marshall Linehan up in Seattle, in Washington, UW, and I think it just wasn't common knowledge. I mean, I don't think that we really had any sort of understanding of ADHD in adulthood at that
Yeah.
time. It just wasn't the water people were swimming in clinical work. And I think there was also very little to maybe no recognition of what we now consider like level 1 high masking adults with autism
Yeah.
or autistic adults. And so I don't think there was any malice in them not being considered in the skills training curriculum,
It's
but
just a
the
different.
reality is they weren't.
Yeah. It's true. I'm left-handed. I'm a proud left-hander, and when I was at school, we were
Yes.
never considered. It was a
Yep.
completely. It wasn't personal. It was just something that we didn't do. So I completely understand that.
Yes. And so there are some things like so like some when we talk about longer term sort of emotion regulation skills, we talk about things that do help mood over the long term, like getting enough physical activity, sleeping well, feeding yourself. Those are all really hard things to do as a neurodivergent adult, right? And so I'm noticing gaps of like, okay, we're talking about these things that help, that do help. All the research we have shows us these things help, and yet they're not accessible for most people in this group. And so needing to take a step back and being like, well, what do people need in order to be able to do any of these things, like task initiation tools or strategies, creative problem solving around a neurodivergent brain that would maybe allow someone to be able to use some of these tools was missing. So I had to go and kind of fine tune and insert things there that were like, we have some prerequisites here that we need to be able to access these tools and come to connect to, your question around rejection sensitive dysphoria. In this communication skills module, our interpersonal skills module, we didn't talk about rejection at all. It's like, here's assertive communication skills. Here's how to ask assertively for what you want and need and to repair and resolve conflict.
But
But
not how to deal with the facts when you get rejected, which as a
yeah.
neurodivergent person, it happens quite a bit.
And it's also like, it's the biggest barrier for like all humans to
Yeah.
being able to successfully interact with others, right? In order
Yeah.
to communicate effectively, the biggest barrier is rejection, and it's missing. So then that led me to really sort of, again, deep dive into RSD and people's experience of that and thinking, again, what's the prerequisite? What would we need to be able to do before we could even consider making an assertive request if maybe we have people-pleasing tendencies, for instance?
Yeah.
And the research is pretty fascinating. I find it fascinating. I think your audience will find it fascinating too. Because rejection is a human experience, right? And that's for good reason. We are hardwired for rejection to be an incredibly painful, aversive experience. And that's because we've evolved as a tribal species. We
Hmm.
have only survived as long as we have as humans because of our interconnectedness and reliance and dependence on other people.
Yeah.
And it's so important to our survival, to our evolution, because, I mean, historically, until quite very recently, our rejection has literally equated to death. Like,
Yeah.
if you were rejected by your tribe,
Rejected from your
you will die.
tribe. I've done many a deep dive on Homo sapiens. It's my thing. So yes,
Yes.
I know.
So, like, You're going to lose shelter. You're going
Yeah.
to lose protection. You're going to lose care when you're sick. You're going to lose access to food. You lose the
You're
opportunity to
fucked.
procreate.
Yeah.
You will die,
Yes.
right? And it's more important to our survival than like physical pain or injuries. And so when we look at like our brains on fMRI scans, we can see that our brain prioritizes the pain of social exclusion and social rejection over physical pain. It lights up more of our brain areas. It's the same brain areas that process physical pain, that process
Because
rejection pain.
sometimes it hurts, like it's a visceral
Yes.
pain.
Yeah. That's a pretty like universal description of people who identify as having that RSD experience.
Yeah.
It is a visceral pain. It feels like a
Yeah,
knife in the
it
chest, a
hurts in
punch
your
in the
heart. Yeah.
yes. Yes. And there's so much crossover in our brain between
Yeah.
these areas that are processing physical pain and these areas that are processing the social rejection. But it's more important, the social rejection pain to our brain,
Yeah.
right? It lights up more areas. We remember it in more detail. It hurts more even when we think about it happening in the
Oh,
future
so also
or
it will
remember
cause
it happening in the past.
long-term trauma, where if you broke your bone and it goes back to normal, but when you have this pain in your heart, it still leaves us that scar.
Totally. And if you think about like learning, right? Like social learning, if you fell and you broke your leg, you broke a bone, you might be a little bit more cautious the next time you're in the similar situation, right? Be like, "Ooh, I fell before here. Like, let me slow down. Let me be more cautious." How likely is it, like, how often are you experiencing that though? Compared to you experiencing a rejection pain, how often are you interacting with other humans
Yeah, all the
24
time.
7,
You
365?
can't get away from it.
Exactly. And so it's hardwired to be painful for everyone. And it's also, like you mentioned in the beginning, logic goes out the window, frontal lobe's offline. She's not your bestie. She's not
Yeah.
participating. She's left the building because it's such a primal circuitry, right? And
Yeah.
again, this is we're still talking high level, like all people experience of rejection
So
is
even neurotypical people can feel like this too.
absolutely, yes.
But are neurodivergent more prone?
The differences come in frequency and intensity.
Mhm.
So, again, all humans, evolutionarily, biologically, are wired for rejection to hurt, to be really
Mhm.
important to our brain, and it's a primal circuitry. It is threat detection, survival mode. It is not logic based.
Because, in a class of 30 people, I probably was the only one that was, I don't know what you call it in America, but I was sectioned as a child a lot. Like they put me in a special hospital a
Mhm.
lot. And I think I was the only one of my peers that have got sectioned for like things like RSD.
Yeah.
So everyone else must have been coping with these things in a different way. I physically couldn't cope. So
Yes.
how were that? Yeah. So I'll let you carry on. I just wanted to interject that.
You're totally right. So yeah, so usually when we're talking about RSD, it's not that everyone else thinks rejection feels great and is
Yeah.
lovely and doesn't affect them. But when we're talking about RSD, it's frequency. So someone with RSD is more likely to interpret and maybe even a neutral interaction or set of observable facts as rejection, right? So it's kind of a classic example of like passing a colleague in the hallway, right? And maybe someone without high sensitivity to rejection would be like, "Hey, Susie," and Susie would, maybe kind of make a gesture and keep walking by. And then maybe somebody, and they wouldn't think any more of that the rest of the day. And then maybe somebody with RSD, they have that same sort of interaction and they're like, "Oh, Susie didn't seem as like bright or warm as she usually is, or vote, she didn't say anything to me. She just waved to me. I wonder if she's mad at me.
So
Oh,
it's
we
because
had that
we
kind of weird."
overthink it more.
It's just like the filter for what counts as rejection is wider. So
Yeah.
like you're gonna
The
catch
pain
more
threshold
things.
is better not better, but the pain threshold is higher in neurotypical people than it is in neurodivergent people for RSD, if I can liken it.
Yeah. And pain is the second part. Right now we're
Yeah.
talking about like what counts as rejection,
Yeah.
right? So for someone with RSD is more likely to interpret things
Yeah,
as
the
rejection than likely.
interpretation of it. Yeah, that's what I meant. The
Yeah.
interpretation. So, if I get a text message, I text my son the other day and I text okay, like, okay. And he
Mhm.
said, Mum, is everything, he's in his 20s, Mum, is
Mhm.
everything okay? You didn't write okay, and normally, if I text someone, they wouldn't even register that. So I think,
100%. That's
which is what
very
you're
true.
saying, is neurotypical people that wouldn't even come up on their scale, but neurodivergent people are so much more susceptible to overthinking this.
Yeah,
Their
it's
threshold is
more
much different.
it's more like, hypervigilance, if we wanna use that term, to
Mhm.
potential cues of rejection. So, like,
Mhm.
more is getting screened in as a threat.
Mm.
And then we've got the pain intensity, right? So frequency, more things I'm likely to interpret as rejection. My brain automatically, it's not a conscious process if I have RSD. And then when I do feel pain, so when something does count as rejection, again, it's more intense, it's more viscerally painful, it lasts longer, right? So there's like sort of the detection filter is wider, more things come in and count as rejection. And when they do, it's a more painful rejection experience than
Mhm.
maybe somebody who's not particularly rejection sensitive.
Yeah, because there's so many more factors involved, so many past hurts. So it's
Yes.
lots of factors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that.
We can look at sort of the biological and the social aspects. And
Mhm.
there are biological aspects of rejection sensitivity. One, it's pretty heritable. So like there's a it runs in families. We
Yeah,
don't know exactly like, what genes specifically, but we do know, if you have a family member who is highly sensitive to rejection, you're more likely to be highly sensitive to rejection as well.
because that's learned behavior, or because that's intrinsically in you.
Because of some intrinsic factors. And
Yeah,
honestly, probably the intrinsic factors we're looking at is
yeah.
ADHD and or autism, right? Which is also heritable,
I
likely to
know,
run.
I'm thinking about it with me and my dad because that's that's where it
Yeah,
comes from. So yeah, I see
exactly.
exactly.
And so just how like I was talking about, broader emotion regulation, emotions hit harder. So it's like they come on fast and hard when executive function is different, like when there's
Mm.
executive functioning differences. And so you're more likely to like again feel that rejection pain hit really fast and being really overpowering and overwhelming. It
Mm.
sticks around longer, so it takes longer for it to kind of peak and pass than it might for somebody who's not particularly rejection sensitive. And you're going to be hypervigilant for those cues because that's such a painful
Yeah,
experience,
because you're
right?
scared, so you're in survival mode. That
And then
makes
we've got the
sense.
like social component of again, it's estimated to some be like somewhere up to even 99% of adults with ADHD fit the description of rejection sensitive dysphoria. And that's not a coincidence. Yes, there's the biological component, right, of like emotion, having a different relationship with emotions and emotion regulation than maybe a non ADHDer. But there's also the facts that people who grew up with ADHD experience so much more correction and criticism than other people, like
Yeah.
vastly more people. And unfortunately, we know from studies of children, kids with ADHD get rejected by their peers at a significantly higher rate than kids without ADHD, and it's not
Mhm.
mitigated by medication. So even kids who have even not even the late identified people, right? But even kids who have a known
Got
ADHD
medicated from the
diagnosis
jump.
from jump and are medicated, they
Mhm.
still experience a disproportionate amount of peer rejection. And so yes, there's some biological component here, but we've also got I learned this honestly. Like
Yeah.
I learned this based on the patterns I observed in my own
Yeah.
life. And that when, I was sitting in a classroom, I got called out and corrected for what I was doing 3 times more than my
Yeah,
peers by
you
a
didn't have to
teacher.
learn it from a book. You were taught it in
No.
real life.
No. And that extends to basically every context that a kid has, right? Whether we're talking about them being in daycare or school or at home. They're constantly getting the message either directly or indirectly, but
That you're not good enough.
usually quite directly,
Yeah.
right? What's wrong with you? Why can't you just,
Be like other people.
yes,
Yeah.
get it together? And so it's sort of both, right? Of like there's some hard, I kind of like to split when I'm talking with neurodivergent folks into two buckets of like hardware, right? Which
Hmm.
is probably fundamentally not changing. It's just how your brain is wired, and software of what did you absorb, learn, what got installed, right? Somewhere along the way. And that can change. Like
Yeah.
we can update software.
So in that case, that means there is a way to l- unlearn. No, not even unlearn. There's a way to get rid of this rejection sensitivity disorder, because I know up until my 30s it ruled my whole entire life. I'd never spent more than a couple of months happy in my life. It affected me in horrific ways due to relationships and stuff like that. It was always relationships. I was always heartbroken. It was always horrific, and it wasn't just like a breakup. It was a breakup and then I would feel suicide. Like, it was
Yes.
horrific. So I don't have that anymore for some odd reason. I don't know, I've done a lot of work on myself, and I just don't put myself in that position. But are you saying for a lot of the people that I know, because I have clients, I have a lot of friends, etc., is there a way for them to they're desperate to unlearn this behavior? They're
Mm.
desperately don't want this. It's ruining their life.
It's suffering. It's
It's
incredibly
it's
painful.
horrible.
Yeah. We don't really know enough because RSD isn't a diagnosis, right? We
Yeah.
haven't done a lot of like controlled research on it. So
Yeah.
we don't know enough where I could say you can reverse it or
Mm.
undo it. And it sounds like that's your personal like
Yeah,
experience, which
because
is
you'll
amazing.
never undo the trauma. But is there a way to teach
Well, I
people?
mean, you can recover from the trauma.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, like, I don't, I couldn't make that claim
Yeah.
necessarily, like, as a licensed medical professional to say, oh, you can reverse it, because we just don't know enough yet.
Yeah.
But in my like clinical observations in my work, we can both learn to cope better, recover
Mhm.
better from rejection when it happens. Because, again, rejection is a human experience. We will always feel rejected as long as we are not sociopathic, people who don't care about how we interact with and influence other people in the world. Rejection should be painful. Like, I don't want to
Yeah.
take that away. Rejection is painful for everyone, right?
Yeah, it's
It's
like
like,
labor. You can have an easier labor, but or it's just one of them things. It's always going to hurt, but you can
yeah,
manage the pain sometimes.
yes. So there's that kind of aspect of like the unavoidable pain of human rejection. We can
Mhm.
recover from that better, probably, than we are right now. And the old emotional learnings, right, from all these past experiences can be updated,
Yeah.
because rejection itself is painful, and this is true for like in from my perspective for all human emotions. Emotions are painful, right? We have painful experiences, and they're tolerable. What's actually becomes intolerable, like the position you've gotten to where you mentioned where like now I'm thinking about taking my own life.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's
Not for
the
years and years, but yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
that's the intolerable point,
yeah,
right? Where it's like I'm not coping, I'm not
yeah,
managing, I'm not recovering
yeah,
from this. That is almost always not because of the actual pain of the emotion itself, but of what you make it mean.
yeah,
What does it mean about me that I just got dumped? What does it
yeah.
mean about me that I got fired?
Yeah, and
What does
when
it
you've
mean about
internalized that when you've been neurodivergent your whole life, and you've always felt like, why can't you do this like your sister? Why can't it's you've internalized everything. So when you're rejected, it's being rejected all over again. So I can see exactly
yes.
what you mean. Yeah.
So
And I
we
think
can
that's what it is for a lot of neurodivergent people.
it is. It's sort of like a confirmation that the way that I've come to believe I'm fundamentally flawed, like irreparably flawed, is true,
Yeah.
right? So it confirms these these old beliefs that have become so internalized that they actually aren't survivable, right? They
Yeah.
are so intolerable that we will shape shift and go to extreme behaviors and just to escape it, right?
Yeah.
So there's kind of this twofold approach to kind of treating or recovering in some way from RSD. And it's one, being able to recover better from the ordinary pain of rejection that is a guarantee in this life if you care about people. And then resolving some of those old internalized beliefs and that old emotional learnings that come from the trauma that don't have to stay the same. They can be changed.
And how is this a long process?
It depends. Of course, it depends on the person. You know
Yeah.
what your old stuff is, what your old experiences are, and so all of the therapies that work for this kind of rely on the same mechanism of memory reconsolidation, and they have a few like predictable ingredients to be able to create this real like root level transformational change where something that once felt really true, even if you know it isn't true,
Yeah.
just feels different now.
Yeah.
Because I think I've never met a neurodivergent person who is not already managing themselves to death, right?
Yes.
Managing themselves so intensely that they're exhausted and ready to collapse.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
so
That's
this
why
is
we
the
burn out so often.
Yes. And this is the reason I only work with people in my therapy practice in this way, is because I don't want you to manage yourself more. I don't actually want you to cope better. I actually want life to require less coping
Yeah.
at all, and for it to just feel easier and just feel true and just feel more natural. And so it's sort of like I just had a conversation with a client yesterday. It's a go slow to go fast.
Yeah.
So it can be a little bit slow in the beginning as we kind of work through the layers of all of these protective patterns that we've adapted, like people pleasing, perfectionism, the sort of should monster that kind of keeps
Yeah.
the score of what we should be doing, the kind of internalized expectations from the world, right? And when we do it that way and we get to the real root of why are all of these like behaviors that we get kind of sick of, why
Mhm.
have they been necessary? Why have they been really helpful? Why
Yeah.
have they been the only option you've had?
Yeah.
Then we can actually work where the pain is, right? Where
Mhm.
that like where those vulnerable experiences are, where those old experiences are. And once we get there, that part is actually way faster than people think it is. People expect for like the wounded parts of them and the old experiences to take like years of therapy and for it to be like brutal and then for it to be like sobbing the whole
Yeah.
time and feel emotionally exhausted for 3 days after. That's not required. I mean, there are
Is
some
that just
therapy
your therapy? Yeah, that's what I mean.
there are
There's
some
some
therapy
therapists I've been
approaches.
to and it's been like that.
Yes, there are some therapy approaches that work that way, but it's
Yeah.
not necessary. So, I'll throw out a few names and I'll kind of explain some of the ones I do, but coherence therapy, internal family systems therapy, accelerated resolutions therapy, EMDR is probably the more popular of these.
Yeah, I've heard of that, yeah.
They all rely on memory reconsolidation, this kind of neurological process to really change what's stored that feels so true,
Yeah.
right? And so they all kind of have a little bit of different approaches, but the core ingredients of how they get there is the same. Some are faster than others. EMDR, for instance, is having a moment right now, which is pretty cool. It's like in a lot of popular media.
I seem
Um,
to be in an echo chamber of EDMR.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes sort of a minimum of maybe 8 to 12 sessions, which are
Yes.
usually like once a week or something, to target one area, like one old experience or one core belief, essentially. And then of course, like for I think most neurodivergent people, there's more than one. Like it's complex, right?
It's a
There's a lot of different
lifetime.
factors. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
it can take longer. Personally, I've done EMDR like as a client and I find it to be pretty emotionally exhausting and kind of
Yeah.
kind of
I've heard
brutal.
that a lot as well.
It's
Yeah.
a lot of kind of
And
Let's
you don't have to do all that to heal. Can you
no,
it's not necessary, so why would you put
yeah.
yourself through it?
I I'm not gonna I don't want all the EMDR
Yeah,
people to come
okay.
for me.
No,
So, it works for
I
some
get do you
people.
know what? I've met some people
Personally,
that have
I don't
had
love it.
I have met some people that have had EDMR and they've had a really good experience, and they don't feel that they would have healed any other way, and
Yeah.
that's great. But I meet other people that think that that's too long and they had a very quick way to heal. So, it swings and roundabouts.
Yes.
It's what works for you. So do you feel like once we've uncovered what the root cause is, then we can that's when we're nearly halfway there?
It's the first step.
Yeah,
So, of these kind of ingredients for change, for like real long-lasting change, the first one is bringing the pattern into conscious awareness,
yeah,
right? Which is where, like you're saying, most therapy stops. Like if we're talking about traditional talk therapy, we stop at insight. We stop
yeah.
at understanding the connections, which neurodivergent people are already really good at. They don't even usually
Yeah,
need to come
because
to a therapist
we've
to know that.
overanalyzed it every night at 4:32 a.m. for
Yeah.
that whole life. Yeah,
Very insightfully. Like
yeah.
they know exactly where these things come
Pattern
from, right?
recognition,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's is an important step, but it's only the first step, right?
Hmm.
And then we gotta kind of work through people's internal defenses until we can get to a point of really kind of like essentially these old emotional learnings or these beliefs. I like to think of them as they're like stored inside an emotional learning container in your brain.
Yeah.
And these are sort of like implicit learnings. We might not even always have, oh, this happened, this like concrete thing that has a beginning, middle, and an end happened. And then I learned that I'm not good enough, right?
Yeah.
It might be like so many things, and even some things that were communicated indirectly that I don't even remember before. It's just like always been the water I was swimming in. I've always known I'm not enough or I'm not measuring up.
Yeah.
And so these are kind of stored in an emotional learning container. And this is very like literally in our subcortical regions of our brain. So our cortical is on the top, is like the frontal lobe we were talking about, that holds all the knowledge, that knows what's true, that goes out the window when we're rejected. And then underneath we've got these subcortical regions, right? Again, the more primal, the more primitive, kind of reactive places. And this is what feels true in our body and our nervous system in the moment that it gets triggered.
Yeah.
And so when we stop at insight, we're up here in the cortical regions, right? We're kind of trying to work top down. Like if I can understand this better, then somehow it will fundamentally change what feels true in my nervous
Yeah.
system. And it just doesn't. We have to work bottom up. We have to go to the part that is holding the emotional learning, the thing that feels true, even if you know it's not,
The
and
root.
work there, then it can trickle up and impact how you show up and how you
Yeah.
feel in daily life when you encounter those triggers. So
Do you
we need
do you sorry, carry on.
oh, go ahead. So we need to bring it into conscious awareness, right? But then we've actually have to experience it. So we need to like go to the place where these emotional learnings are stored and open that emotional learning container. And this is some like kind of exposure part of all of these interventions is like meeting the pain that's carried there and what felt so true and so consuming and so visceral at the time.
Yeah.
Now, what we're talking about as far as does it have to take that long? We don't actually have to do that very long. Some approaches, like cognitive processing therapies, like another trauma therapy, that they rely on that phase being really extended. It's like a
Yeah.
lot of like how much can you tolerate exposure to this painful traumatic stuff?
Yeah.
And eventually, like so I'm saying, like it works. Like eventually, you do become desensitized to it. Same with
But is
the
desensitization
EMDR.
a good thing?
It is like it is, but it's also only the second ingredient. We still have
Yeah.
another important
Okay.
ingredient. But that phase doesn't have to be as long as people think it does. Because I think that's what people think when they think of, oh, if I want to handle my old stuff, I'm gonna have to sit in the pain of those, like, of that emotional learning stuff
Yeah.
for weeks and weeks or months and months, right?
And
And
normally, we can't, neurodivergent people aren't good at sitting with the emotions sometimes. Well, a lot of people in general,
most
it's a
people.
hard place to sit. It's a hard
Yeah,
place. I can only
yeah,
speak for
it's
myself,
brutal.
but yeah,
It's brutal.
it's a really hard place to sit
Yeah.
in. So, the shorter time, the better.
I think so. I mean, that's like my whole philosophy is like, what's the most efficient, lazy way, least
Yeah.
painful way we can get you where you need to go? What's the minimum amount of exposure to the painful stuff
It
that's
makes sense.
necessary? Because it is necessary,
Yeah.
but what's the minimum amount that's necessary in order to get us where we need to go?
That makes perfect sense.
And so this is the difference between EMDR and accelerated resolution therapy, or ART, which is like my preferred therapy. And it's quite similar to EMDR in that it uses the bilateral eye movements, moving your eyes back and forth, and some sets of like noticing what's going on in your body or maybe visualization. But it really condenses that whole process so that instead of maybe the 8 to 10 or 12 sessions, it's one. You
Yeah.
finish the entire process, start to finish, in one session, which usually for my clients, well, depends on how distractible the brain I'm working with, but maybe about 2 hours, 2.5
Yeah.
hours, or something like that. And so the last ingredient for change of all of these therapies is a mismatch experience. So something where what that was stored in that emotional learning container, I have a real experience of it not being true now.
Yeah.
And again, this is different than knowing it's not true now, because that's top down, right? That's trying to work with the cortical regions of your brain thinking, well, that's not happening now. It doesn't matter. We have to feel the different. We have to feel the experience of it not feeling true now. And there's also lots of different ways to kind of introduce this mismatch experience, but I like to kind of skip to that as quickly as we can, right?
Yeah.
With still having all the important ingredients for
Yeah.
change. And then what people notice after we kind of go through that process is that I really like to have follow-up appointments with people after we do like an art session, because they don't even notice that they showed up and responded so differently than they would have before, because they're not thinking about it. They're not
Until
trying.
you've pointed it
They're
out.
not managing themselves.
That's
I'm being
crazy.
like, "Wait, what? What did you
Yeah.
just do?" And they're like, "Oh my God, I never would have done that before.
Yeah.
I didn't even recognize that as a thing,
Yeah.
because it
Because
just felt easy, normal, and natural."
that makes, yeah, it wasn't
And
like a big epiphany moment. It was just something that came
and they weren't
naturally.
and they weren't trying really hard, they weren't, like, managing themselves. It was just the new normal way of responding, the new natural way of responding. It's really fulfilling and exciting because
That's what I was just thinking. I bet it's so fulfilling. Is
yeah.
it, not everyone can do therapy and etc. Is there a way to heal by yourself? Is there any way to kind of, is there any way around it? Or do
Yeah.
you always need some form of therapy? I'm a great believer. I think a therapy is very good if you're not going to do some. It's a hard road, you know. I've worked a lot on myself over the years in a lot of different ways, but I do think therapy is helpful if you get the right kind that works for your system. But there are
Mhm.
some people that just, especially in the UK, we can't, it's getting expensive. The list is crazy. Is there anything that we can do to help ourselves?
I think that I know all the processes,
Yeah,
and I know all of the ingredients for
yeah,
change, and I can't do it for myself.
yeah.
So I think that especially what we're talking about is relational trauma, right? We're
Mhm.
talking about trauma that originated from relationship with other people.
Yeah,
And I just don't think that there's a way you can heal relational trauma alone.
yeah,
I think it has to happen in relationship. Sometimes people will have corrective experiences, mismatch experiences in relationships, right? Like they might have a new partner, and it's just like it's a really different way that their partner shows up for them than maybe some mistreatment or abuse that they've experienced before. And that heals something, right? Having this sort of mismatch of like, oh, I'm like really safe now. And that's very different than before. And even then, I have clients in that exact same situation where they have been in abusive relationships and they're now in a really safe, supported, loving relationship. And there's still a part of them that is still holding on to that emotional belief that they're unsafe, right?
Yeah.
And so I would say for people, who are maybe struggling to access services, maybe see if there is accelerated resolution therapy, a provider near you, because it is short, right? So if you're like, okay, I can't afford a year of therapy, could
Mm.
you afford 3 sessions, maybe like 3 extended
Yeah.
sessions, maybe 5 extended sessions, and see if maybe that can get to the root of a lot of it.
And so I we've all got lots of things going on. So there's there could be issue from school, there could be an issue from your parent, your childhood. But it all could come down to one thing, that you don't feel you're good enough. Can that be tackled in one thing, or is it a lots of sessions of lots of different processes?
Very, very often, people are surprised how much changes in one go.
Yeah.
Because at least, again, if I'll speak to accelerated resolution therapy, and EMDR are similar in this way, is that we well, in art, there's a step in the process where we're sort of throwing in every other related experience. So we might start with one, like memory of, like, let's say being ridiculed in front of a classroom when you were
Yeah.
7 or something like that. And then there's a step in the process where, like, everyone else, every other version of you who had experiences of being humiliated or feeling like they're fundamentally flawed.
Whether
Let's
that be at
let's
home, at
throw yeah,
school, with your
whether that was
siblings,
last week,
wherever.
yeah,
Yeah.
whether
In
that
your
was
adult life. Yeah.
from 7 to 34, right?
Yeah.
Let's try throwing all that in there too, and let's see how much we can get rid of in one go. And often it's a lot,
So you
like
don't
a lot,
have
a
to
lot.
tackle each thing separately,
Yes.
because I would be with you for a while.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're more like we're working with themes, right? Because
Yeah.
we're part of what I do as a therapist is helping we're following the thread down to what's the deepest core belief that this is organized around. And then the odds are there's a lot of confirming experiences around that core belief that we can, when we help that part of you or change that memory, then everything else changes too.
What do you think with neurodivergent people? I know once you've met one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person, but do we all have a similar core belief? Is it that we're not good enough?
I think most people do, to be honest.
It's a people thing.
I think most people have very similar core beliefs. They have beliefs about, like, what's required for me to be worthy.
Yeah.
Like, I need to be perfect to be deserving of belonging. Again, social species, tribal species, almost every core belief comes down to belonging, connection, and acceptance
Yeah.
in some way, right? And some belief that folks are carrying around how they're not worthy of it, or that they're conditionally worthy of it, or how it's not safe to want it.
It's crazy how much like your childhood before 7, it just shapes everything. Even as a parent, it's a crazy weight of responsibility to have, knowing that you are shaping someone else's future like that. It's a
Yeah.
lot. I've got some
I love
questions, but I'll carry on.
Oh, it's me. And I love working with parents
Mm.
too, because really, of course, your kids they're always going to have stuff. They're always going to have stuff that they're going to have to sort through, when they're older. But really, the data we have on attachment, right, on what it takes to have a secure attachment with a caregiver, is really encouraging and full of lots of grace, because it's like 30 to 50% of the time. If you're
Yeah.
attuned, maybe even up to half time. And when you're not attuned to your kiddo and you get it wrong and you're able to repair, you're fine. They're going to be fine.
I hope so. Thank you so much. I have just a few questions from some other people. How do I stop taking things so personally? Do you have any advice for that? A neurodivergent person,
Yeah.
autism and ADHD, I think it's probably relationship wise. They take things personally, not specifically romantically, but any relationships. How
Yeah.
is there any other than therapy? Is there any advice how they can deal with that?
Yeah, so I think it's a good opportunity to talk about because we talked about sort of the, I kind of framed we have the recover from rejection set approach, and then we also have the resolve the root of rejection
Yeah.
sensitivity approach. So I think this is a good time to talk about the former, about what do you do when rejection is activated? What do I do when I'm taking it personally?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing to do is to stop, pause, put the phone down, walk
But
away.
that's what all people that've got their shit together, they're like, not now, but Ellie, stop. Think about it. Sleep. Then they love it. Sleep on it. And I cannot sleep.
Yeah.
Like, I have to do it now. Like, I have to think now. How do people just chill out for the night, have a cup of tea, and think about? I
Well,
can't do that.
I'm not even asking that much. Just
Yeah.
literally like, because again, rejection comes because we're in some sort of contact with other people, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, how can I pause and like remove myself from the situation temporarily
Hmm.
for a moment, for 5, for 10, for 15, for 20 minutes? And I think what trip in doing my years of DBT skills groups, I know that what trips people up the most is that they're like, oh, it's too late. I've already reacted. I already sent that text. I already lashed out. I already snapped back, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be. It's never too late to pause. Because if you keep going on the direction of the reaction, it's just going to get worse.
Which a lot of
So,
people do. They think that
yeah,
it's done now. I've got to keep going.
I
I
gotta
can't.
like double down. I gotta get myself
Yeah.
out of it.
a
And so
hundred percent.
this is a skill. You will not pause or stop early or on time for a long time, and that's okay. As soon as you notice you're reacting, that's your cue to pause, right? And so what's going to happen is you're going to notice, oh, I'm been reactive for 15 minutes. Okay, now I'm going to pause. And then it's like, oh, I'm only like 5 minutes into my reaction.
Less and
And
less
then
every
eventually
time.
it's like, oh, I like reacted, but then I really quickly was like, oh, I'm over my threshold. I'm reacting, right? Until
Yeah.
you get enough repetition where maybe sometimes, not all the time, no one is ever going to do it all the time, but sometimes maybe you even catch like the internal cues that you have the urgency to react and you take a pause, right? So
Yeah.
that can look like if you're in like a heated text exchange with someone, like putting your phone down and taking a couple steps away before you respond via text. It could look if you're in a conversation with a partner, just saying, I'm feeling really reactive right now, and anything I say is going to make this worse. So I'm
Having
going to go take
boundaries,
10
which
minutes.
is a lot of things that I know that I used to struggle with in the past, is having boundaries. I wouldn't have been able to say to someone, look, I need to take some time away from you. We'll reconvene tomorrow. So
Mhm.
you need to be kind of a boundaried person to be able to do that. So I get that. Yeah. a
Yeah,
hundred percent.
these are all skills, right? These are
Yeah,
things
they're
that
all
take
skills, and quite a
repetition
lot of
and
them are like interlinked as well.
yes, yes, which is again why it's helpful to work through it with a therapist because
Yeah.
we all have different internal barriers to
Yeah.
why it might be hard to pause, right? Of course, there's the impulsivity if you have ADHD, but also it could be like, my historical learning is that if we don't resolve this now, we'll never talk about it again.
Yeah. Yeah. So many different factors.
There's so many different factors. But generally, our first step is to pause. And this is because we basically only have 3 patterns of reaction when we're in rejection: to lash out, right? Attack, blame, snap back; to withdraw, to like
Mhm.
shut down, pull away, isolate; or to approach, right? To fawn, to people please, to try to smooth it over, to over apologize. And all 3 of those patterns only lead to more disconnection long term, right? In the short term, they might work, quote
They
unquote,
might
right?
patch
But
it up. They'll put
yeah, but
a band-aid on it, as you guys
yes,
call it, a plaster on it, but it will come off eventually.
yes. And long term, all of those patterns create more disconnection with people, which is what we're already reacting to, is feeling disconnected,
A hundred
right?
percent. I can see that throughout my life. I've now I like nowadays I've noticed that for myself, but that is 100% true. It took me a long time to work out, but it is 100% true.
Yes. Yes. So the goal with pausing is to not do anything that's going to make it worse, right? And so
Hmm.
that I'm not going to react in one of those three general ways and create more disconnection long term. Then what do we do when we create a little bit of space? Once I've created a little bit of pause for myself, is use a couple tools, a tool or two, to reduce the intensity of the very visceral distress that I'm feeling if I'm in rejection, right? And where most people get this wrong is they reach for a self-soothing skill. They're like, I'm gonna take a walk or lie down or journal or make tea or something.
Hmm.
And distress is not self-soothing pain. We have to use a tool that's matched to the level of rejection pain. So
Okay.
rejection is big pain. We need a powerful tool,
You
not
can't
a
just go for a
self-soothing
walk
tool.
and feel better.
Not usually. We need
Yeah.
something usually more
I need
powerful
to know
to
what the
match
tool
the
is.
intensity. Yeah. So I love some DBT skills. So I'll tell you a couple. Also, I have a little rejection recovery protocol, little freebie guide that I created that we can link for
Could
your
you give,
audience.
yeah, can you give
Yeah.
me a link to that? Because I looked for
So
you on Facebook to link you today and I couldn't find you. So I was going to afterwards ask you for your links if that's
I
okay.
don't even know if I have Facebook, but I will. I'll give you all the
Yeah.
links. Yes.
Perfect.
And so I'll tell a couple options. So tip the temperature is a DBT distress tolerance tool
Okay.
that rapidly changes your biochemistry. So it's a heavy hitter. It's a break glass in case of emergency tool, which is the level of intensity of distress we're feeling in rejection, especially for rejection sensitive, right?
Yeah.
And so this is activating our mammalian dive reflex. So we take the gold standard version's like a bowl of ice water, but most people hate that. Most people hate it in general, but
I
it
wonder
works.
why.
But it works. So you can grab a bag of frozen peas from your freezer or cold pack, whatever you've got. It could even be like a frozen washcloth you keep in the
Yeah.
freezer. If you don't even have a freezer, you can grab a couple bottles of water or cans of soda from the fridge.
Have a shower,
Something cold.
cold shower.
Nope, because we're going to be very specific with our cold
Okay.
exposure. So we're
Okay.
going to take this cold pack and we're going to
Hmm.
hold it over our eyes, our temples, and our upper cheeks. So this whole like band from our temples over our eyes. So we're going to hold it specifically there and only there. And then we're going to lean forward. So if we're sitting in a chair, we're going to bend forward at the waist so that our head is lower than our heart. I think diving into cold water,
Yep, that makes sense.
and hold your breath like you just dove into cold water for as long as you can. Maybe 30 seconds. If you're super distressed, maybe that's 15 seconds and you just do
Hmm.
a couple rounds. Usually in one round like of that, you'll notice really substantially you drop in your heart rate, lower respiratory rate, lower blood pressure, and your blood flow gets redirected to your vital organs. And so it's like a hard reset for your body,
Yeah.
and it works really well. And again, people hate it because nobody likes cold. It's kind of
I mean,
annoying.
but in that situation, it's better
But
than
this
feeling
is,
like shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. If we're gonna like self-harm
Yeah.
or send a
Exactly.
destructive
Then
text,
this is a
or
very good tool
like
to use.
it's worth it. And consistently the feedback I get about this is I'm pissed off that worked because it's not very
Yeah.
fun
Yeah.
to use, but
So
it
you'll
really,
have to do it
really,
every
really
time.
works. Yeah.
Do some people build a tolerance to it? So could it be
No,
worried? No. Okay, so
no,
that's good.
'cause
So you
it's
can't
yeah,
build
it's
tolerance.
activating this mammalian dive reflex. So all
God, it's
mammals,
great.
when we
That's
get thrown
crazy.
into cold water, we have the same response of like lower all of the outputs and redirect the blood flow so you survive this fall into the cold water. And so
Wow.
we're kind of hacking this
The
mammalian dive
human
reflex.
body is crazy.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful.
So, like you mentioned, a lot of times cold exposure is a commonly, hold an ice pack on your neck or inside of your wrists or take a cold shower. But we need to be more specific about the cold exposure in order to activate this dive reflex. So it's
Yeah.
specifically over your eyes, temples, and upper cheeks. It's leaning forward like you're diving into cold water and holding your breath as if you just fell into cold water, right? So that's one heavy hitter, really effective. I'll give you just one more, and there's a couple more in the guide. But intense activity. So this completes the stress response cycle. So, right, we talked about how rejection is such an important threat to our brain and our nervous
Hmm.
system, and it's so primal that to our brain, again, it's more important than if we're being chased by a tiger or just got startled by a snake or whatever it is. But our sweet little baby nervous system hasn't quite caught up that like it was a strongly worded email or okay instead of okay AY, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so our body is flooding us with adrenaline or epinephrine, right? It's giving us all of this energy, cortisol. It's dilating our pupils so we can see our threat better. It's tensing our muscles so we're better prepared to flee or fight off this attack. And so when we're using intense activity, we're using all the energy that our body is giving us to fight off the threat. And so when we see animals like prey animals in the wild, think like a gazelle out on the Serengeti is being chased by a big cat, it is once the threat is seen, they get a ton of energy, right? To be able to run away, run away, run
Like
away,
an
run
adrenaline.
away. Yes.
Yeah.
And they are able to recover so well, like if they're successful at getting away from the big cat, they're able to recover so well because they used all this energy that their body gave them. And their body's like, oh, cool, thank God we got away, right?
Yeah.
Successful. And so we're sort of completing that stress response cycle when we use a bunch of energy in the moment where we're feeling really, really intensely activated by rejection. So that could look like doing some jump squats. It could look like running stairs in your house. It could look like even if you're stuck like in a car, it could be, marching your feet up and down as fast as you can, as hard as you can for maybe, see if you can go for 5 minutes. You'd be surprised how exhausting that is. Could be shaking out your whole body really intensely or aggressively, right? But it's not our planned exercise. It's in the moment when you're really activated, when rejection is threatening to make you do something that's going to make it worse. How can I burn off this energy right now in like 5 minutes?
Yeah. So it is possible, but these are really good tools. So please link
Yes.
these will be great. Is there anything that you think that, I had a whole list of questions to ask you, but I feel like RSD is it's all I hear about from a lot of clients and a lot of friends, and I feel it's so important to there's so much that we could have covered. Is there anything you think that we've missed out? Anything that could help someone before we wrap up?
Actually, there's a couple more steps in this like recovering from rejection. And I think the
Perfect.
next one goes to what your client specifically asked of how do we not
Amazing.
take this personally, right?
Yeah.
So we've paused, so we're trying to like reduce harm, right? I'm not
Mhm.
gonna try to do something that's gonna make it worse. We used like a heavy hitting tool that matches the intensity of rejection pain. So now hopefully like we've got a little more access to our frontal lobe because we've like moved through the peak, the worst of the threat. Now that we've got access to like some thoughts, some words, ideally, there this the next way people, most neurodivergent people, tend to try to recover. They try to get out of this rejection cycle that backfires, is that they try to talk themselves out of it. They try to tell themselves it wasn't personal. They didn't mean it that way. What's wrong with you? Why are you so sensitive? Right? Whether it's self-critical or not, it really is misguided because your brain doesn't care at all what the
Yeah.
truth is, right? And this is really interesting
It's gone
because
offline.
yes, and this is really interesting because this research also is not on people who are rejection sensitive. This is just people.
Mhm.
But there's been a number of studies, a lot of studies have been replicated to show how much logic does not matter to rejection pain.
Yeah.
And these are,
I wish it did.
it would be easy,
My
right? And
life would have
we
been
keep
so
trying.
different.
We
Yeah.
keep trying. We keep trying to talk and logic and lawyer and reason our
Mhm.
way out of feeling how we feel, but it does not work. So we're
Mhm.
expending energy in a way that the science shows us, rejection sensitive or not, it's not going to make it better. And some of the consequence of that, like the unintended cost of that, is that we're invalidating ourselves. So instead of saying, God, that really hurt, or of course I'm feeling like this. Anyone who feels rejected feels like this. That's true,
Yeah.
right? instead of saying, that felt really personal. We're trying to like argue with the truth of that, which is really invalidating. And again, we learn that honestly because most of us have been invalidated by other people consistently. Like that's the script we're used to hearing in those
Yeah.
moments. But
That
again,
pain point.
it backfires. And so actually, instead of trying to make it feel less personal, just lean into how it feels, like how it does feel. And that's not agreeing with the story. That's not saying like Susie who passed me in the hallway, oh, she is pissed off at me, right? It's like, it hurts to not know if I'm okay with her.
Yeah.
Like if we're okay. Or like that text that said, okay, that really made my stomach drop and this really is painful or distressing, right? And so it's just acknowledging, like putting some words, now that we should have some access to a few words, to how we're feeling or how we interpreted something and how it makes sense. Again, not saying that it is the facts of a situation, but that how I feel about it sure makes sense, right?
Yeah.
I'm, of course, of course this hurts as much as it does. I'm rejection sensitive. Of
Yeah.
course this hurts. My brain is literally wired for rejection to hurt, right? So the next step, the last step, is to reconnect. And it's not actually usually to reconnect with the person we're feeling disconnected from, not the person who triggered any rejection, but actually to reconnect maybe with ourselves, maybe with pets or animals or nature, or, go look at the night sky. Maybe it's spirituality for you. Maybe it's another, like an external person that's a really trusted friend or support. But it's just essentially like rejection destabilizes our need, like our basic wired human need to belong. And we're trying to reestablish that we do belong somewhere,
Yeah.
even if it's only to ourselves,
Yeah.
right? In that moment. And when we go through this process of recovery, instead of trying to stop, fix, argue, logic, lawyer, reason our way out of rejection, but actually recover from the wave of it, and we go through all these steps, the odds are that whatever story this person has that they started with that made it feel personal, it won't be that way anymore.
Yeah.
It will just naturally change. And that's because in most cases, the story that our brain makes up follows the state of our nervous system. So when we can actually use some tools to help reduce the intensity of distress, show up for ourselves and validate our experience without agreeing with the story, and reconnect somewhere, the story changes by itself. We already know it's not personal, and that feels true now, as opposed to trying to force the perspective early. If we support our nervous system through the recovery process, the story will change by itself.
It's a lot to take in, but it's amazing the fact that so they're the points. So you go from the diving, and then you change the narrative.
Yeah. So it's stop, use a tool to regulate your nervous
Yeah.
system that's powerful enough. Self-validate, right? Instead of trying to talk yourself out of how you feel, just show up for how you feel.
Yeah.
And then reestablish connection somewhere with yourself, with a pet, with nature, with God,
Some way where you feel that
with a friend.
where you feel you belong.
Belong. And then you can be curious and step back. Does that story that my brain gave me still feel true?
Yeah.
99% of the time it won't.
Sometimes when you revisit it doesn't.
Yeah, most of the time it won't, because it wasn't ever about logic in the first place.
Yeah.
It was about your nervous system responding to threat. So when you support yourself through recovering from that threat, the story changes by itself.
Wow. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
It's been really enlightening. I think a lot of people will be using them tools.
I hope so. I'll make sure I send you the link. Yeah, you can grab a free rejection recovery guide. I also have a little graphic that just has all 4 steps summarized really nicely. You can save it to the photos album on your phone, favorite it, because we know that in the moment when you need it, you're not going to
You
remember
might need it.
You're not
Yeah,
gonna remember
I
any of
know
it.
some people that have got things like that as their screensaver because you don't know when that's going to trigger and you might need
Exactly.
it. Where can we find you, Becca?
You can find me on my website. It's flowforwardcounseling.com. It's probably a good place to start. Yeah, you can email me from there. I think my Instagram's linked from there. semi-active on there, working on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing. Becca, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge today. I know
Thanks,
so many
Ellie.
people listening are gonna find this so helpful, and hopefully they'll come away with a much better understanding of their self and why they react the way they do. So thank you so much, Becca.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.